Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Welcome, women, back to another week of the Moon Baby Magic Podcast. Thank you so much for being here, and we have a really wonderful episode in store today. But before we dive in, this week we do have another sponsor, and yes, it is me again. So this week's sponsor is the Moon Baby Medicines Herbal Shop, which is my handcrafted, organic, and wild remedies for the wildly holistic woman line. So this is my herbal shop filled with medicine made by my loving hands from the goodness of Mother Earth. My intention in making all of my herbal products is really that they just support you in taking deep, loving care of yourself. So the shop has anything from tinctures and elixirs to herbal body oils and salves to other goodies like my popular Moontime cacao blend made with cacao, ginger, cinnamon, and rose powder designed to support you in connecting to your heart and reducing cramps and warming the womb during menstruation, to my Yoni Steam Blend, the Womb Heart Blend, to clear any emotional stagnation before you bleed, to mushroom medicine like my favorite reishi and the immune supportive turkey tail, to passion flower, which is a beautiful wind down at the end of the day and sleep aid, to all sorts of really beautiful goodies. One that's just nearly out of stock that I'll mention is the Sacred Woman Oxymel, and that is an infusion of rose hips, red clover, and honeysuckle in apple cider vinegar and honey. What oxymels are really good for is extracting vitamin and mineral content from plants. And so this Sacred Woman Oxymel is really created to remineralize water. That's my main use of it, although of course anything with apple cider vinegar is going to be great for digestion, so it can be good for that too. But I love adding in it to my water to remineralize water that is filtered. The rose hips, I'll specifically point out, are really high in vitamin C content. And the red clover is a really wonderful hormone support for women. So there's much more there than I can share here, but the link, of course, is in the show notes to shop this medicine, and I hope you love it. It is really an offering from my heart to yours. All right, so diving into our episode, today on the podcast, we have my inspiring friend, Laura. And Laura is really a shining example of what it means to live a radically authentic life, to take full ownership over your choices, and to actually choose yourself. Laura's story takes us from her European upbringing and learning to navigate body image in a family culture that was open-minded, but a Christian schooling system that was not, to the messiness and grief of the maiden to mother transformation and how Laura wishes she had honored her last bleed. And finally, to Laura's fully outside of the system, wild pregnancy, free birth, and early motherhood years. And there's so many interesting and transformational stops in between. Laura's energy and storytelling is just absolutely magnetic, and her zest for life is truly infectious. I can't wait for you to hear her story. Okay, hi Laura, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, the first question I always ask everyone that we can just get right into is to share a little bit about what phase what phase of life you're in and what phase of your cycle you're in. So if you want to share first what phase of life.
Yeah, so I'm in the mothering, deep in it. So I have a 15, 17-month-old, a 17-month-old, 1 year, 5 months. She just turned on Tuesday, which is amazing. And she's
Oh,
hilarious and funny and gets more beautiful and lovely every day. And her hugs are my favorite. And yeah, it's interesting. And I have not bled yet. So I just in June, like the 28th or 25th, was my 2 year anniversary since I've bled the last time. So since I was a
Wow.
maiden, and I haven't had my mother bleed yet. So it's really interesting, actually. I've been thinking about this a lot, like, because so much of what I'm learning about is like cycles and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't really have a cycle. And I was thinking about that because men and women are have different cycles, right? So
Yeah.
like men have a 24-hour cycle and women have a 28-day cycle, or around there. And I was thinking, like,
Yeah.
when we're mothers, like as in this mothering stage where I don't have a cycle right now, I kind of have a totally different cycle. Like, it's not 24 hours, nor is it 28 days. It's kind of like this other cycle. And I think it's because in this stage, at least when we biologically follow how biologically we're designed to be, which is breastfeeding and connecting with our babies, sleeping with our babies, all these different things. And I think that's why I don't have my cycle yet, because I'm so bonded with my baby still. It's like you're in this stage where you kind of just ebb and flow with whatever your child needs. So I can stay up
Mhm.
all night and I still have like this high oxytocin because we breastfeed. So every time we breastfeed, I get oxytocin. She does too. And that's really cool because oxytocin gives me energy, gives me motivation. So I could sleep very little and still have tons of energy in the day to be behind her. Whereas if my husband was up all night, he would not be able to function the next day. So I think that's why we're designed this way. And that's why we aren't supposed to have our cycle back until our babies are more in the external. They're separate from us again, and it
Mm.
depends on how women deal with the mothering is how that happens. So for some women that's earlier, but some women also have it really early. So I'm not saying that's for everyone, but I definitely think that that has a part to do with it, because there are some women that they breastfeed and everything, and they get it like within 2 months. Like I know a woman who had two babies within like a year and a half, which is crazy, but it's amazing too that she can do that. I think it also has to do with our bodies, right? If our bodies are ready to have another baby. So I guess my body's not ready yet, or soon anyways, maybe.
Wow. I mean, I want to just say that I love that you said, maiden bleed, and then you said mother bleed. Like that word, that phrase to
Mm-hmm.
me just sounds so powerful, mother bleed. Like I wonder what that's going to be like for you when it comes, and how it's going to be different, and what it's going to bring up for you. And yeah, it'll be really
Yeah,
interesting
it's
to
super
see.
interesting. I've been thinking about it too. It's like there's also stages in being a mother. Like I'm a mother now, obviously, and I will be for the rest of my life, which is also
Yeah.
crazy because it's one of the things I think I shared with you at some point, was that I never thought about that before. Is that when I had my last bleed, I didn't even know it was my last bleed. And then all of a sudden I was pregnant, and I will never be a maiden once you're pregnant, unless, I mean, even if you lose that, you are kind of still a mother. And so you kind of never will be a maiden again. And
Mm.
so it's like I never honored that, and I'm really sad about that. I was really sad. I'm not sad about it anymore, but there was like a lot of grieving with that. It was like, I'm never going to be a maiden. Like this is my life forever, and that's okay. Like I wanted to be a mother. I'm excited about it. I love it. But there is something about being a maiden, having like that freedom, and now having like a year, almost a year and a half being a mother and being pregnant before that. It's like this, your life and your body is not yours anymore. It is on one side, but also it's like you now are everything to this little being. This
Yeah.
being needs everything from you, and it's an honor to do that. It's an honor that she chose me to be a mother, but it's also like different. But I also realize now, being a year and a half later, and now she's starting to be more interested in other relationships also besides me. And so I have like an hour or two a day now in the last couple of weeks where I get to do my own thing, where I get to work and be hands free, which is beautiful, and I bless it. And I realize I'm coming back into kind of like my maiden phase of being a mother, because I now
Mm.
like am dancing more and enjoying my life and feeling like more connected to myself again. And yeah, so there's like stages in that too. And I think there's a maiden stage of being a mother when you get your bleed back and when you kind of become your own
Mhm.
person again, and your little child becomes their own person. And yeah, it's super interesting. There's like lots of phases, and it's all, yeah, beautiful. I love it.
I love hearing how you speak about it. I remember that. I remember you when because you had your daughter when we were in RBK school together, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I remember that after that, you did share that you were like, wow, I didn't actually honor my last bleed. And I wish I would have known, and I would have done something. And I also think it's so beautiful. Well, I think first of all, to say that if other women are listening to this, it's like that's such a normal experience, or a common experience, that like we don't necessarily recognize our last bleed as maidens.
Mhm.
And I think it's something that could be really beautiful if you're listening and you're like considering becoming a mother, to really consciously honor that. But it is, I think, part of this larger grieving process that happens in maiden to mother, even if you're like the most intentional ever about it. Like I have
Yeah,
a
that's true. Hmm.
yeah, I have a feeling that most women would experience that grief. Yeah, no matter what. And so it's just interesting to
Probably.
reflect
That's
on that.
true. Yeah, but I guess then it would be like the same thing. I would be then making sure to like honor that bleed, and maybe it's your last bleed. Like every time you're like, thank you, and then well, maybe this is the last one because I realized I didn't even think about it. I was just like grieving that I didn't have a baby yet or I wasn't pregnant yet, instead
Yeah.
of being like, okay. But it's hard. It's so hard when you're in the conception stage, and especially if it goes longer. Like mine wasn't that long, but it was longer than some women's. And it's like this every time. It's like this grieving of like, oh, maybe I can never get pregnant. Maybe I'm that woman. But I've
Hmm.
also learned now in my journey and dealing and working with women is like our bodies can heal, and it may take time, but if you will heal, and it is possible no matter what your situation is. And that was part of my journey, was like leaning into trust, like the month where I didn't focus on it and stress about it, and I just kind of let life take over. That's the month that I got pregnant. So it's like really about trust and surrender, even in the conception journey. So it's the same thing with birth. Like in birth, when you surrender, that's when the baby's born. And it seems to be like in every situation, every time we surrender as women, I feel like that's when the breakthrough happens. And it's really, I think, a part of our journey.
Yeah, it's so beautiful to hear that. I agree. I also I think it's really wise too that you're saying that you're in this maiden phase of motherhood, and you mentioned, getting back your bleed and how that's sort of this maiden phase of motherhood. And it's true, like we get to experience the maiden every month in our cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Even when we have children, like we still get to like tap back into that energy, like although it's in a different way, we still
Mm-hmm.
always have that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's also like a coming to yourself and like a reconnection with your body. And I do find now after pregnancy and birth that I'm more connected with my body than I ever was before. That
Mm,
I'm more sensitive. I can feel things I never felt before. Like I'm more conscious of my body. Um, and then now like I'm feeling like more light and feeling more sexual again, like all these different things, and like just in myself, like not necessarily with another person, just my in myself, like looking at my body and enjoying it. And I don't know, it's really interesting. I'm definitely feeling like a different energy coming through me that I didn't have before.
wow, that's amazing to hear. It's so
Hmm.
inspiring. I mean, it makes sense too, though, because it's like your body just did the most creative, incredible thing. And so it's
Hmm.
like, of course, you're going to have this newfound, like, wow, my body, especially if
Hmm.
that experience was an intact experience for you, like it was a
Hmm.
positive experience. And of course, it's going to like change your relationship to who you are and what you're capable of and how amazing your body is.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's, I think that's what the design of birth is like birth is an initiation for women. Like first is our first bleed. That's the first initiation from a girl to woman. And then in your initiation into motherhood is like it breaks everything open. If it's done in intact, like you said, that's a perfect way to explain it. If birth in the process is intact, is by its biological and spiritual and divine design, I believe that it makes women the powerhouses they're meant to be. So like as a maiden, you're like kind of like you might be confident, you might not be, you may know what you're doing, you might not, you may feel good in your life and your career and everything like that, you might not. But when you become a mother, it's like all of a sudden you become like you are initiated into the woman you're meant to be. It's like your first
Mhm.
step into your higher self, like the woman that you're designed to be. And if it's done right and it's supported and protected and honored, and then it is the most beautiful initiation. And if it's not, it can be super intense because all these changes are so intense and you're so disconnected from your body, you're so disconnected from your baby, you're so disconnected from everything that it's just, whew, it's tough. It's really hard and it's really painful. And it's because it's not supposed to be that way. And that's why there's so much pain and there's so much depression and all these different things that can happen after birth because all the things that are supposed to happen, the hormones that are supposed to flow, the experience you're supposed to have, the beauty and the honoring and the peace that's supposed to happen doesn't happen. And so you just have this hectic chaos constantly, and that just kind of continues. And I think that's why motherhood can be so chaotic, and parenthood in general can be so chaotic because there isn't that respectful, joyful, peaceful emergence for mom and baby when that transition happens.
Yeah, it's so true. And something I always hear and something I say a lot on this podcast is like rites of passage happen whether or not they're marked or whether or not they're marked in a conscious or intentional way. And so, like that giving birth, that becoming a mother rite of passage, it's still going to be your rite of passage, even if it's traumatic. And that's a really
Mm-hmm.
challenging place to be. And I'm not saying you can't heal from it, because of course you can. And I know
You
so
can.
many women who have
Absolutely.
done deep,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, deep healing work to repattern that experience for themselves and their children. But it's just vitally important that as women, we know our options, and we know like how really monumental these rites of passage are. And our rites of passage as women are all like embodied, like they're in our bodies. It's not
Mm-hmm.
like men where they need to like go out to the woods and like be there for 5 days without food and water. They have to like create
Mm-hmm.
something. Like ours, they're happening. And
Inside of us.
so yeah,
Exactly.
and so it's about
And I
tuning
believe that's
in.
why. Mhm. I believe that's why the medical system is set up the way that it is, I mean, not the individual people, but the system as a whole, is because it's constantly disconnecting us from our body. Like from our first bleed, it's like, okay, now use this thing, shove it up there and hide it. And then it's like, okay, now you want to have sexual intercourse. Now, okay, now go take this pill so to stop that so that you can control what's happening in there without connecting internally. And then you go to a gynecologist once a year to check if you're okay because you couldn't possibly know. And then eventually you meet someone and then or you don't and you get pregnant, whatever, whether it's planned or not. And then you, instead of going inwards, like, am I pregnant, and figuring out like, okay, let's go to a doctor and have him shove something in you to see if you're pregnant. And like, it's like constantly over and over and over again disconnecting you further and further and further and further and further and further away from your
Yeah.
body. And there's like this huge disconnect. And then birth in the hospital, even with midwives sometimes, if it's not the right support, it's like this constant disconnect. It's like, instead of asking yourself and going internal, are you okay, is everything okay, is your baby okay, it's like getting ultrasounds and getting all these things, and then there's somebody else sticking their fingers inside of you to check if you're okay because you personally couldn't know, right, supposedly. And then it's like getting an epidural, then you're literally disconnected from your body, and all the functions that are meant to be are disconnected. And then your baby is born, they take it away from you, they wipe it, they clean it, and then all of a sudden this clean baby comes to you, and there's like this disconnect. Like, there's no like biological
Yeah.
bond because everything that's biological is wiped away, everything's sterilized, and then you're just like, there's this thing in front of you, and there's no wonder that so many women have disconnect. And then if you have a C-section, it's a whole nother level because you never even felt it, you didn't have those activations that happen when you have vaginal birth, you don't have all these things that are meant to happen in order for all the right hormones to flow in order for you to have that energy. Like I talked about, oxytocin is an energy builder, and if you don't have that oxytocin flowing, and or then you're interrupted from that oxytocin flow because someone takes your baby or someone's constantly touching your baby or whatever, then all those things that are meant to happen aren't there. And there's no surprise that women are so disconnected. And it's not a judgment, it's just a fact. And it's just super sad. And it's heartbreaking because it's not supposed to be that way. And it's no wonder that motherhood is seen the way that it is in our society. And that over and like more and more, it's actually more and more women are coming back to the realization that that's not how it's supposed to be. Somehow internally it's happening, but there's still so much disconnect, and it's heartbreaking because it's hard for babies, it's hard for moms, it's hard for the whole family, it affects everything and it affects our society as a whole.
Yeah, so well put. And it's like we often call this the cascade of interventions in birth, but I like that you started it. It's like it starts much sooner than birth. Like it starts as when we're girls and we're told, that we need to ignore our first bleed, or and then we get put on birth control, and that like tends to be this like second rite of passage. And then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it just goes down the line, and you need to see the gynecologist to make sure you're okay, because how could you possibly know? And just everything you just said. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, like you have to choose if you want to take ownership over your life, like you have to choose to
Mm-hmm.
jump out at one of those points. And then it's going to
Exactly.
be easier, right? And then your rites of passage are going to be more beautiful, and they're going to support you in
Mm-hmm.
growing and blossoming rather than making you more disconnected.
Yeah, it's interesting how you say it. It's actually, I would say the cascade of intervention started way earlier than your first bleed. It starts when you're born. So
Mm,
if you are born into peace and confidence, and there was one story that I heard that really was what made me convinced that free birth is the choice that I want to make no matter what. Because basically the woman, she said that how beautiful is it if you could give birth to your daughter. She was talking about daughters, but it could also be for boys, and you trust them, that they
mm,
are born in trust, that they are born in a partnership with you, that it's not this stupid baby that comes out of you that's dangerous to your body, but you get to trust them and build this relationship from the moment that they're in your womb and then come out of you. There's this trust that this baby is born and I trust you. I know that you know what you need and I'm just here to facilitate it to you. And there's a totally different experience than what is most often happening where a baby is forced out of you, is then injected with things and all these different things. It's, and also the difference between a peaceful birth, like where a baby is born into peace and love and calm and surrender and honor, whereas it's into this hectic environment of chaos, like I said before, of just like, okay, now shove this in there and do this and do this and do this and like separate them or scrub them down, and then they finally get to have their mom. It's a totally different experience. And then they're more also when you have a child and they get to watch their mother give birth, and they get to see that there's this beautiful experience where they get to see their mother do something that's difficult, maybe, or maybe it's really powerful and beautiful and like orgasmic, like some women experience, but they get to see it and they get to have this like this physical little experience of like, whoa, this is what life is. It's a totally different experience how those kids are grow up and what they experience in the world and how they see themselves, how they see the world. And then eventually when they have their bleed and they're honored and all of that, we get to change it totally for our kids. So if we were not born into that love and everything, we get to change it for our kids and for our daughters. And that's one of the best things that I feel like I get to gift my children, is that I get to do it totally different for them. Even though my mom was natural, she was like the most natural in her time. In my time, we were like the hippies, but it was still way less than what I'm doing for my daughter. Like I'm the next level. So it's really interesting. And it's such an honor to be able to do that.
It's such a special thing to do. And yeah, you're so right. It's like with each generation, it's not like to blame the older generations. It's just that like with each
Mhm.
generation we learn and we can do better. Um,
Exactly. We only know what we know, right? We can't, I don't blame my parents for what happens. It was what it was. They did the best that they knew and they did the best. Like my mom she would like, for her, she had a home birth. And that, like, everyone thought they're like, you're going to kill your baby and all that, right? Just for having a home birth. And she was a
uh,
nurse. And like, everyone's like, why wouldn't you want to have a birth in the hospital? She's like, I do not want my colleagues to be in the most vulnerable position and like them watch me, all of this. So she
right?
had a home birth, which was really crazy for everyone in her life, except for maybe her mom, even though she also had hospital births, but her mom was like a homeopathic and raised her homeopathic. So it was very different. But for my dad's mom, it was like nuts. She was like, what is wrong with you? Like, you're going to kill my first grandchild. And like, I was the first grandchild and it was all this stuff. And so my mom went like way beyond and she raised me homeopathic and all of that. So she like
Wow.
went way beyond everything that was normal. And even as a nurse, like she didn't bring me to the hospital until, not until I was dying, but like if I went to the hospital, I knew that there was something really up, you know,
Really
like,
wrong.
and so all of these things, my mom already was like way out there, and now I'm more out there. My parents were like, you scare us. Like, sorry, you started it.
Wow. I mean, it's so funny and not funny, but it's just so different than my upbringing. Like, I was a C-section baby. I was bottle fed formula my whole childhood, like
Oh my
so many
goodness.
pharmaceuticals, like
Mm-hmm.
going to the doctor anytime I would like sneezed. And so it's always amazing to me when I hear of women who have like kind of grown up with this.
Mm-hmm.
Were
But
you
also
always
not,
on?
because my mom, like all of this, like my mom, when I told her I was going to free birth, like she knew that I was going to do it, I think, because I had kind of gave them preemptive warning because I've been studying this way before I was pregnant and all of that. But like I kind of kept it to myself for a long time. So I was like, I don't know what people are gonna think, and I don't know. And like she tried to convince me, like, maybe you want a midwife because you know maybe something will happen, or it's nice to have that support. Or and then she convinced me to be
Mhm.
closer to town because we're an hour and a half away from town. She's like, if in
Right.
case something happens, you don't have to worry about it. You know, you can just have peace of mind that the hospital's close by in case something happens. So I did like a happy medium. I was still about an hour away, but I was like not quite so close. And I remember in my birth, I was like, thank God I'm not closer, because if I was closer, maybe I would give in to the idea that the hospital's closer. Like the epidural sounds really great right now, even though I'm so glad I didn't. Like at the end, I was like,
Yeah.
no, this is exactly what I need to do. And I remember telling my husband, I was like, thank you for not letting me go to the hospital. Because I told him like this might happen, even though I hate the hospital, it may happen. Please don't let me go to the hospital. And so he
Yeah.
did his job. He did a good job. And then at the end, I was like, thank you, 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 thank you.
Yeah, like you've got to have people in your corner who know that like what your intention is, and they know that even though
Mm-hmm.
you might be like struggling, that doesn't mean that there's
Mm-hmm.
something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And that's the cool thing. It's like I always use the metaphor for birth as like climbing a mountain. It's just the
Mm,
easiest metaphor because it's something like, especially a steep mountain, like an intense
yeah.
mountain, like a hard workout. And it's like over multiple days. Like it's not just a quick 15-minute hike or something like that. I mean, for some women it is. I mean, that's amazing, and I want to get to that point. That's definitely something that's possible. But I always say it's like that. It's like imagining having someone who has your hand with you, and sometimes you'll walk alone and maybe it'll go into the other path and come back in again. But it's like if you wander off the trail and you kind of get lost a little bit, it's like that person that pulls you back onto the trail and brings you to the place where you want to go, because they know that you want to go up there. And even if like we could just say like, oh no, it's okay, we'll go back down the mountain, or we'll take this lift up. No, it's like, nope, you can do this. You want to do this, you
Yeah.
can do this. And having that person who keeps you on the path that you know you want to go, but even if you get a little bit lost, to help you back onto the path again.
That's such a good way to put it. I love that analogy. Well,
I
I'm
love analogies,
curious,
so it's the easiest way to explain it.
yeah, I'm curious with how your mom was seems like a bit more holistic minded. Um, a lot of women have really sort of traumatic experiences around their first bleed. I would love to hear what
Mhm.
that was like for you. Was it, yeah, just tell me about it.
Yeah, so my mom was holistic minded, but she was still a nurse, which means that she was
Right.
still part of the system. And so that means, for example, she wasn't scared of sickness. She knew that was important. She supported it rather than trying to stop it. So that was what she did amazing. And I'm so thankful for her, because she definitely it was a huge leg up for me. Because like for you had to do like worlds of change in order to get where you are right now, right? So I'm
Oh
so
my.
thankful that it was an easier transition for me, right? And so for my first bleed, how do I explain it? Okay, I remember really clearly exactly how it went. So we had just traveled across the country from Vancouver, Canada, all the way to Chicago. So it was first we traveled from Prince George or Chetwynd. If maybe someone was from Canada here might know, it's like northern British Columbia. It's a 12-hour drive to Vancouver, and then it's another two. I think we drove in total like 3 or 4 days straight, and my parents just alternated driving because they didn't want to take a hotel or anything like that. We didn't have a lot of money back then, and so we drove. And then we rented a house on the lake of Michigan, right? I think. And then we had a big house there, and I remember I was in the attic by myself. I think I had it by to myself, and I don't actually know the age. I think it must have been 12 or 13, somewhere around there. And I remember being like super uncomfortable, super like all the cramping, all of that. And I just like didn't want to do anything. I remember being really uncomfortable. And then I bled for the first time. And I told my mom, but I wasn't really sure. Like I wanted it for so long. I was like, oh, now I get to be a woman. And I was like, is it really? Because it was like so little, right? It wasn't that much. And I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it really is. Like, I don't know if I want to tell her. And like my mom has always been really good with like just communicating that I can always share things with her, like with alcohol and all that. They always never forbade it. It was just like, please talk to us first and we'll help you. Same thing with sex. Like I never was forbade to have sex. It was just like, please talk to me first so I can get you on the pill, which at that time she had no idea. She didn't know that these things were toxic, right? Like my mom, for
Yeah.
example, also extended vaccinations and stuff. She vaccinated me with 3, I think, or something like that, but only a couple things I think she thought was necessary. Now she understands that all of it's shit, but she tried her best. Like she really tried to do what she could, you
Of
know?
course. Yeah.
Anyway, so when I got it wasn't like a gross thing or a weird thing, but it was like an uncomfortable thing. It was like I didn't fully feel, even though I had a good relation with my parents, way better than most teenagers did, like a million times better, and I communicated a lot with them, there was still a level of disconnect. And I do believe it has to do with the fact that I went to school. I was gone for 8 hours a day. My parents worked. So it's like we didn't see each other that much, except for a couple of hours a day in the morning and a couple of hours in the evenings, or even less later. There's a disconnect between parents and kids, and it's something I'm really passionate about that I want to change for my kids. Is I want to do unschooling or homeschooling, unschooling specifically, or world schooling. I would like to travel with them too.
Yeah.
But the idea is to be with my kids and actually raise them and not have someone else raise them, because I think
Yeah.
there's a true disconnect. And I also notice it with my brother, and I think that that's also a reason why my brother and I fought like cats and dogs, because we were never together. So of course, like I remember with my husband, we had a long distance relationship, and so we were apart sometimes 7 weeks at a time, or sometimes 3 months at a time. And even though we talk every day, when we then met, it was like this disharmony. We had to find where we
Mm.
fit together again. And so I think that's what happens with kids and parents and siblings when they're apart so long. It's like it's hard to find that harmony again, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that, even though I had such a good relationship with my parents, even though there was open communication, there was still something missing. And I do believe it has to do with the fact, and my parents and I have been talking about this, because there's some families here that do homeschooling and they have 5 kids and the kids get along so well. And they're like, why didn't that happen for you? And we had like a couple of conversations. We do believe it has to do with the school, like just that separation for 8 hours
Yeah.
or 10 hours or longer a day that does that. And so anyways, even though she was really kind about it, she was really open about it, she even talked to me about, like learning to touch myself and getting to know my body. But I was so shameful because I also went to a Christian school. So it was like touching
Oh.
yourself, masturbation, sex, all of that, your body was like gross and weird. So even though she had this positive idea and she wanted to help me, I wasn't able to because I had this huge, 10 hours a day where someone was telling me that that was bad and gross, and my mom 1 or 2 hours a day telling me that no, it's good and you should do it. That I didn't learn to touch myself until I was 21 years old. I did not look down there. I didn't do anything. I was like, that was like a no-go zone, which is so sad. So I'm so glad I have a girl, and I'm so glad that I know this now so I can change it for her. And like, I let her walk around naked. I don't tell her not to touch herself. Even like she's 1.5 years old, she will touch herself because she likes to. She's just experimenting, right? She's learning, and it's so important. I believe it's really,
Yeah.
really important. That's why I do diaper free too, because it's really important for babies to be able to see and touch themselves and not be in a diaper all the time, so that they get to know their body and there's no shame around it. I also taught, like, I also am very, very conscious about not saying that whatever comes from our body is gross, or like saying,
Mm.
oh, like some people do that. And it's very important to me because that teaches her that she's not gross. Nothing that comes from her is gross. There's nothing weird about it. I'm very conscious about that because I think it all has an effect long term, not just right now.
Wow. That's such a powerful message to be sending to your daughter that like her body, I mean, what comes to mind is just like her body is hers, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you're instilling that from her from the beginning that it's hers and that there's nothing weird or gross or
Mm-hmm.
it's so incredible. What a
Yeah, it's
beautiful
really
gift. And
important,
it's
I think.
yeah, and it's like just like the birth choices, like improving upon, what your mother did is she was like
Mm-hmm.
open with you, but maybe there was a little bit of disconnect, and you're like, okay, well, I want to be open with my daughter and I want less disconnect. So this is the choice I'm making now. And that's just
Mm-hmm.
amazing. That's how we evolve. That's how like generations continue to heal. And yeah, I love that so much. And also what comes up for me too when you share your story is like, I think in a way, most girls probably feel like they can't fully share with their parents what's going on when they get their
Mm-hmm.
first bleed. And I used to think
Mm-hmm.
that that was like some sort of shame that had already come from the culture. But I also wonder if it's just that like we're differentiating ourselves from our parents at that point. Like we are becoming
Mm-hmm.
adults and there's like this thing and it's like, oh, well, this is mine and it's kind of personal and it's about me.
Mm-hmm.
And so perhaps that
Mm-hmm.
is like, that's okay.
Maybe, but also I know for me, growing up, I'm European, so I'm German. I was born in Germany, so most of my parents are German. So I grew up very differently than people did around me. So for example, we talked about alcohol and sex in our household, which other people didn't. Like I do not remember not knowing about sex, and then all of a sudden being like, oh, this is sex. I just kind of knew. My mom had a
Oh,
book
wow.
at home that was like this cute little drawing book with fat little people, and it had all the body parts. Everything was a part of it. Even talked about sex, how babies were made, all of it. And that was like just normal. That was a normal part of my life. And like my
Wow.
brother, he did have sex in high school and all of that. He had a different, he was very much a rebel. I'm a chosen conscious rebel, and he was a rebel for always. So I didn't drink, I didn't have sex, I didn't do all these things, which I don't regret because that's who I am. But also I'm like, I think that there was a big thing that was missing for me
Mm,
because I had a lot of shame around it because I really integrated all the religious stuff into me, which I'm not religious anymore. I still have a belief system, not a belief system. I actually believe more. I have more understanding and trust in life now, not being a Christian religious, than I did when I was a religious, very following all the rules, doing all the things. But
mm,
anyways, and so what was my point? Crap, I lost. Oh yeah, so we were raised very differently, and so the same thing is like I it was normal for me because I also went to Europe every summer, most summers, anyways. And I also went to swimming pools where, in the changing room, there was naked women everywhere. And you would go into sauna and there was naked women. And sometimes there's even saunas for adults where there's men and women naked around each other. And there's not this sexual connection to
mm.
the body. And it's like totally different. I remember also going to Germany as a teenager, opening a teen magazine, and there being a naked boy and a naked girl in there, not in a sexual way, just simply as a look at this is normal. And it was like not together, it was separate. It was just like, this is a man, this is a woman, this is normal. And so there's also like areas, there's like naked beaches in Europe. Like you can go
Yeah.
to Greece or France and you can go to the beach and it's just you're naked. And this January, actually, I went for the first time to a naked beach in Spain with my family with my husband. He was shocked. He's Latino, so that's like extra shame, right? And I was naked with my mom. It's the first time I've ever been naked in public like that with men and everything around. I was naked. I was like, this feels incredible. And I think it's part of my journey of like falling in love with my body, which I already had before. And just looking at my naked body is one of the beautiful gifts that my ex gave me. Is he taught me to love my body. He gave me this beautiful gift of he never looked at me differently whether I had clothes on or I was naked. And it was one of the beautiful gifts. And
Mm,
he's European too. He's from France. So he did this beautiful thing for me where I became confident in front of no matter who I was. And I was good at with that with women, like with girls, my friends, I would be naked. I had no problem with that. But with guys, it was always like a little bit of, ooh, what do they think, you know?
yeah,
Um, he gave me this beautiful gift. And the next level was like this in January, going to this beach and being fully naked in the sun, which felt amazing, by the way,
I bet.
which I've done before here on my property, but I've never done it in public. That was
Yeah.
like a whole nother level for me. And it was like this, like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna do it. And it was amazing. My daughter was naked, I was naked, my mom was naked. It was like this cool thing that my mom has always done, but I was never really comfortable with. And because I did, even though I am European, I grew up in North America. So I still have like parts of those things in me, right? So I'm like this mixture of not fully European, not fully American, and now not fully South American. I'm like, I never really fit in wherever I am. So, anyways, so I had this beautiful experience. And so um nudity for me was never a weird thing. Like I also saw my dad naked. Like he would shower in front of us. It was not a weird thing in my
Mm,
family. And it was only later that it started to become weird as I got older and stuff like that. And I think my dad also got a little shame around it, which is really weird. Like it's like it was never something
yeah.
when we were younger, but it's like changed over time.
Mm,
And so there is a difference, and there isn't this hiding, and there's not this like shame around that. So I want to continue that, and that's what I'm trying to create with for my daughter. And I have to teach my husband that too, is that there's no shame around that. There's no hiding,
mm,
because hiding is shame. And it's like the whole
yeah.
I'm not religious, but there's still like the Adam and Eve thing. Like they were naked, it was just normal, and then all of a sudden they got shame around being naked and they had to hide themselves, right? And that's really
Yeah.
what this our whole culture in most parts of the world, in Europe less, but still they have a little bit of it, is like this idea that our body is shameful, that there's something weird about our body. It's also this idea like we have to look a certain way. If we don't look a certain way, then it's weird, right? And so there's like lots of levels to this, and I think there's really just a conscious action of like I'm naked around my daughter all the time. I show her my yoni all the time. She watches
Mm,
me go to the bathroom, she watches me shower, she watches me do all of this because I want her to
yeah.
know there's nothing wrong with her body because I'm not having a problem with mine. And I think it's an example thing, right? My mom, she was naked all the time, but she always talked about that she hated her body, that she was fat all the time. And it was something
Oh,
that I consciously had to change from the age from like 18, 19 to like 23, and probably longer than that, but like really consciously I had to choose to love my body, and I would choose to like love the parts that I loved already. Like I loved my ass, I loved my eyes, and then I would just kind of like go out from there, and I would be like, my
yeah.
ass is so nice because I have big thighs, so I love my thighs because they give me a nice
Yes.
ass, like I would slowly go out like that. And I also was a photographer, and I did something called the Goddess Experience, and it was something where I
Mm,
taught women to love their bodies through the art of photography. And I would do it first with talking to them and doing kind of like a counseling session, like teaching them about their body, but without, not like what I do now, but just a physical form. And then I would do these sessions where I would teach them. They would first be in clothes, and they would slowly strip down. At the end, they felt so confident in my
mm,
being in my presence that they would go naked, and they loved it. And these women
wow.
would walk out of these sessions glowing. And then when they saw their photos, like, holy shit, that's me. It's because they walked with confidence. Most women walk with their shoulders hunched. They walk down. They hide themselves. They're protecting themselves. And so when I taught them how to do this, it would totally change how they saw themselves. And it was one of the beautiful gifts that I love to do. And I would love to actually incorporate with my work now. Now that I'm learning about the internal parts of the woman, not just the physical parts, I would love to
Mhm.
incorporate it because it's a beautiful thing to love your body. And it's something that I consciously have chosen in my life. And now I do with my daughter because I believe we lead by example, not by telling, you know?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, yeah, definitely Europe really has that going for it, that like nudity is more accepted. I lived in Spain for like 6 months when I was in college, when I studied abroad, and I went to a few nude beaches, and it was just like, it's so liberating to be able to just have your natural body out in the sun and to see other women doing the same thing so that, and not just
Mhm.
women, like you said, there's other people too, but just to feel like, oh, okay, this isn't like a sexual thing. My body isn't only sexual. My body is mine. And it's,
Exactly. It's not
yeah,
just sexual. It is sexual, and sexual is really important, but
yeah,
it's not only sexual. It's like it's the body. It's like there's so much to our body, and our body is literally right now in this existence, it's us. It's a part of us, but it's also separate from us. It's not who we are. It is just a part of our overall experience in this life. And it's super interesting. It's like not cognitive dissonance, but it's like separating ourselves from our body because our body is separate. It's like another being. I always talk about that our body is like another being because when, for example, I believe that postpartum trauma happens because our mind forgets about the trauma or normalizes the trauma, but our body doesn't forget. And so
Mm,
it is telling us that something's up, and that's why we have all these things. And I believe that many illnesses and all these different things are our body communicating with us that there's something up that we need to deal with. And so that's why I believe like our body is yes us but also separate from us, and that's why when we learn from our body, we learn to listen to our body and to our intuition, our instincts, all these different things, we get to fully live in our fullest, most authentic self, all included, because we get to learn everything that we need, and it tells us what's going on in our mind, what's going on spiritually, what's going on in our environment, what we're ignoring, all these different things. It's constantly communicating with us.
okay, so I've really enjoyed hearing about how, yeah, growing up with sort of like a European culture and your backgrounds created this sense of freedom around, your parents being able to always talk to you about sex and to have like nudity be more of a comfortable thing. It's like so vastly different to my upbringing again, because I'm like, when I think about it, I remember a distinct moment when I learned about sex and it was like kind of traumatic for me. And so I think just having it always be like something that just exists in the world, like
Mm-hmm.
another like function of our physiology is really amazing. And yeah, I'm just curious to hear more about like your journey to becoming comfortable in your body and in your sexuality.
Yeah, so it's a journey that I'm still on, but I'll start from where it started for me. So, um, I was, I grew up going to a Christian school. So it was actually my own choice. My parents were not religious. It was my best friend was Christian. And so I always went to church with her. And so I decided to ended up, I was in a public school and I got bullied there. And I had a friend who went to this Christian school and it was much better. She enjoyed it. She liked it. So I asked my parents if I could go there. So I ended up going to the Christian school. My brother also ended up going. And on one side, it was amazing. On the other side, it has a lot of the parts of me that I'm still working through. So it's deeply grained a lot of the shame and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, so like I said, we talked. It wasn't necessarily an open conversation about sex. It was just that I knew about sex. It was like it was an unconscious, just always there, you know? And so when I had my first boyfriend, I did have the talk with my dad, even though I knew about sex, obviously. And I remember it being very uncomfortable. I didn't like that either. So it's like there's that disconnect again, right? So, and then when I was, no, before that, when I was probably between 12 and 14, I was sexually abused, and that was a big part of me probably disconnecting from my body too.
Mhm.
So it was like the mixture of those two experiences made it that like sex was this bad thing, scary thing, um and also the distance from my body. So like that I was very numb down there. I didn't really feel much when I eventually did start having sex when I was 21. I think I started having sex, 22 maybe. So I waited a long time. That was also a part of it. And that's also a part of it that is that I'm still contemplating in myself, because my brother, he started having sex when he was young. He started when he was 14, 15 maybe, and he's like really experimental. He has fun. You like, I think there's a part of it being a teenager is that you just have fun. Like there's no consequences. You don't think about all those things. You just can enjoy it. And I think it's also part of me that I never really was a child. I kind of grew up really fast. I was a nanny from when I was 12 until I was 18. I was full-time responsible for 6 kids. So I kind of was always very, I always told my friends, like, if you're gonna have sex, be careful. Like, don't get pregnant. Like, the best way to not get pregnant is to not have sex. Like, that was my thing. Like, I remember like I talked about this with my friends all the time. And so I was like I was the virgin girl. That was like my identity, which is a big part of it too when you're a Christian, is like you are identified as a virgin. And then when I had sex for the first time, it was a conscious decision. So I consciously was not a Christian anymore. I consciously decided that sex was actually something I did want to experience before I was married, but I wanted to do it with someone that I felt comfortable with, blah 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 blah. So when I did find that person, I did have it. It was a good experience. I have nothing negative at all to say about it. But after that, I was like, who am I? Like, what is my identity now that I'm not a virgin anymore? That was like a big part of who I was. And so I had to reconnect with that, and like also like, what is my boundaries now? Because before it was like meet these guys, I would have fun with them, and there was like my boundary. I don't have sex and I don't do certain things, you know. And then all of a sudden, like, where's my boundary? Like, it was a lot of stuff, but it's still something that I'm working through. I still don't have that experimental bone in me that I want to engage more, and it's something I'm still working through. That I'm still having a hard time connecting with myself. I still have a hard time. Like, I, for example, have only had one orgasm in my entire life, one, with
Mhm.
my first boyfriend, and that was not even with sex. That was him working really hard for it. And
Mhm.
so I've always found that I always meet men, except for my ex, but before that and now with my husband, that aren't necessarily, let's say, experimental either. So it's like they need someone who is sexual. So I've actually come to the realization that it's something that I have to work on in myself. It's something
Mhm.
that I need to work on, and then it's something that will translate into my marriage and into my sexual life in that way. So it's something I'm working on. I'm actually in the Well Fucked Woman from
Oh,
Kim
nice.
Ananami. And so it's a process that I'm still working on. So like in my own body, I feel really comfortable. Like when I am solo, when I'm just me, I feel really good. I feel really comfortable. I love my body. Like I actually can say I love my body. I'm on a journey of loving myself, which is actually going really well. So it's like I loved my body, but the internal part and the mental part, that was still a struggle for the last couple of years. And it's something that the last year has been a priority. And I can actually say that I actually like myself, which is really cool.
Oh.
And so now, yeah, the sexual part is still something that I'm working on. It's still a journey that I'm on. So I feel like also with birth and pregnancy, I'm not as numb anymore, but I'm also dealing with prolapse. So there's like that now, and that's prolapse. The uterus has to do with self-image and there's like a couple different meanings behind it. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So there's still stuff that I'm working on. The prolapse is definitely part of it, and I think it's definitely a spiritual thing rather than a physical thing. But it is also a physical thing because I didn't rest long enough after in postpartum. So it's like a lot of levels. Everything is a lot of levels, right? So yeah, it's a journey that I'm still working on. It's something that I'm committed
Okay,
to.
so yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And I think it's really like a common story for women to have to undo a lot of programming around sexuality and, like what they saw from their parents or what they heard from their peers. And I've even heard it said, I think Nancy Lucina, one of my teachers, said this, that like if we aren't getting like conscious education from older people in our life, we'll find it somewhere else. And so that's why like
Mm-hmm.
I love what you're doing with your daughter of just being really conscious about what you teach her, because then she's going to have containment from you around like how she can be and how she can express and feel safe within that. So there's no need to like, it seems like you looked for safety in like Christianity and all these other places that maybe weren't you. And I think that's normal,
Mm-hmm.
like as girls, we're trying to figure it out. As young women, we're trying to figure it
Mm-hmm.
out. But I think it's beautiful that you've been on this like deep self-love journey, both with your body and with your like mind, it sounds like. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
I think most women have to go on that journey. I know it's been like a big thing for me too lately is I kind of did the body thing first too. And I feel really good about my
Mm-hmm.
body. And now it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like let's work on this self-talk.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things I'm learning also is like that's one of the things that I've really proven to myself this last like 6 months or something, that I've been really a little bit more, but I've been really conscious about how I speak to myself inside of my brain. Like I was really good at it before, like because before the pandemic, I was a really successful businesswoman. I was traveling the world. Like I loved my life. I loved what I was doing. I was good at what I did. And then all of a sudden, all that was gone. I was in a marriage he's an amazing man, but it was like when you're in a marriage, all of a sudden there's like this mirror of like how often how often you screw up and like how often you say things that aren't the right thing to say, and then all of a sudden I didn't have a job anymore. All the things that made me feel confident in myself was gone, and all of a sudden I just had me, and
Yeah.
me I didn't like so much anymore. I realized that I never really liked myself that much. It was just that I was really good at living life, and I could just hide behind being really good at stuff. And when I wasn't good at it
Mhm.
anymore, then all of a sudden it was really hard. Like I was in good marriage, I wasn't didn't have a job that I was good at. I didn't have friends who were constantly reaffirming me, and like I have beautiful friends who were really proud of me and always told me like, oh, you're so amazing, you do such amazing stuff, like we just love you. And all of a sudden those were gone too. I was just me by myself with my husband, that was it. And so it was like
Mm.
a really big year. Like it's been a journey to like myself again. And I've noticed like this last, yeah, probably 6 months or so, that I've been really conscious about what I say. Like I don't let myself talk that way anymore. I don't let like I stop myself if I start, and I'm also conscious about it because I don't want my daughter to speak that way. I think that was one of the big things. I was like, I don't want my daughter to ever feel the way that I have felt about myself, about herself, because she's amazing and she's beautiful. And I think we all I don't think it's natural for us to hate ourselves. I think that's something that we get taught. And like I told you, like my mom, she talked badly about herself, and I think she feels the same way about herself. And I think that's where I learned it from. And so I'm consciously changing that so that I hopefully can teach my daughter not to. Then I've also noticed recently that sometimes when I'm really frustrated, like if something like I just have a really shitty day and a bunch of stuff happens, I sometimes like, which is I think is also a good thing I'm learning from my daughter, is to express emotion and allow it out. Like I used to just hide it inside of myself and all that. And so the cool thing about having a toddler is that they express everything and they don't give a shit who's around them. They just express, right? And so I started to like sometimes like express from frustration, like ah, like but much louder. And the other day she dropped her milk because she drinks raw milk, which is amazing. She dropped her
Yeah.
milk and she yelled like I yell. I'm like, oh boy, I am such an example. Like I have to be so careful about what I do because she is just absorbing everything, right? And so that's where I like over and over and over again and reaffirmed like shit, I gotta work on myself because everything that I think, say, do, even if you don't say it out loud, your kids absorb it. The same thing is with fears, right? Like I tell this to my clients all the time. Like if you have a fear, if there's something that you're not dealing with, your child will absorb it, even if you never say it out loud. Like my grandmother, for example, is terrified of spiders. My dad and his brother are terrified of spiders because their mom was terrified. Or like my best friend, she's terrified of the dark. Her son was never scared of the dark. And then all of a sudden at like 2 or 3, all of a sudden he was scared of the dark. Or like whatever. Like it's absorbed, even if you've never said it. And the same thing with those fears is like everything else. Like if you think something in your mind, if you feel something, that is absorbed by our kids. And so that's why I think, at least for me, that's the work that I'm doing because I have a daughter. And I think it's the beautiful blessing that I have having a daughter is like being really conscious of like, because she's a daughter and I'm a woman and I was a girl, I was a child once, like I'm much more conscious. I think I'm much more conscious having a girl than I would with a boy. And I think that's the blessing that I've been given, is to just be like everything that I do, she will see in herself. And I see myself in her. Like when she was born and I found out she was a girl because I never knew until she was born, till like an hour later when I finally checked, and I was like, girl, oh my god, it's a girl. And anyways, I was really excited about it. And then like looking at her and her beautiful little yoni, and I'm just in love with her body and I just love everything about her. And I'm just like, she's so beautiful and perfect. And I'm like, if she's that beautiful and perfect, that means that I am also, because
Oh,
I'm the same thing. Like she comes from me. And so like that has been a big thing, is like at one point somebody looked at me like I look at her, and somewhere I lost it. I don't know if it was like by my surrounding or someone made me feel that way, or I don't know where it happened exactly, but I do know it was like around 4 years where I stopped to like myself, and I never want her to feel that way. And so I'm consciously changing me so that she hopefully doesn't absorb that thing from me. So that's the work that I'm on right now.
you're bringing tears to my eyes with that. That's just like to look at her and find that beauty and think like, oh, at one point someone looked at me this way. That's just so sweet and special and such a beautiful way to look at it. And it's so much of the work you're doing to me is, in line with what I know of this maiden to mother transition, just not that I've been through it myself, but through studying it. And
Mm-hmm.
especially the thing about um, having this sort of my teacher, Nancy Lucina, who I reference all the time in this podcast, because she's really who I learned like the archetypes from. She
Mm-hmm.
talks about this idea that the maiden has a lot of confidence, but the confidence isn't actually grounded in anything. It's confidence that comes from the
Oh.
outside world. And,
Whoa, yes,
and
I've definitely experienced that whole, yeah, of course, because you're
yeah,
constantly people are telling you you're beautiful and all of that, so you feel good because you look good, and then all of a sudden you start to lose that because of different reasons. And like, yeah, I definitely noticed that when I was pregnant. I was always like, when I started to look pregnant, I was like, I do notice that I don't get as much attention as before. So it's like starts to be, you
yeah,
have to just find your own confidence, and it's not from external sources. It's true, and yeah,
yeah,
like my journey has been exactly that. That's so interesting. Never thought
I
of it that way.
know. Yeah, it's so interesting because she like, and I feel it for myself, even though I'm not a mother yet, but I think about my earlier maiden years. And that's like something I'm actively really working on now, is like not sourcing, um, yeah, like my confidence from outside things and instead sourcing it from within. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, like it's such a common thing for the mother archetype to then need to find that within her. And that can be really hard because in order to find it within yourself, you kind of have to take away all the stuff that was giving it to you before. And that's really deep
Yeah.
in our work.
And you have to trust yourself. You have to also like trust that, I don't know, it's a trust thing, 100%. And I think that's what the biological and divine design of pregnancy and birth is to learn to trust our intuition, because we have it when we're maidens, but one, our world doesn't allow it, but also it's like you don't really get the opportunity to really unless you have certain situations. Like I learned it from traveling because I traveled alone as a girl. So I had it in that situation. Like just if I felt something was off, I just trusted myself, even if I didn't know if it was right. Or as a business owner, I also learned it to learn to trust myself because of
Mhm.
you do things that are scary. You spend like lots of money, you accept lots of money, and you have to learn to trust yourself that way. But most women don't get that. Like most of them have a regular job, they live at home, or they live, they live their regular lives. So they never really have an opportunity to trust themselves and have that instinct. And so then they come into pregnancy, and that's really where the design is to learn to trust ourselves because we have this baby inside of us and we can feel it. And if we go internal, we can feel everything that's happening. But then we go to a doctor instead and outsource it. And so
Mm.
then we don't get that opportunity, that the initiation of learning to trust our instincts, and then in birth having that 9-10 months of just not having the answers. Then in birth that all comes to accumulation, because I remember when I was in labor, I never ever even thought about if my daughter was okay. It wasn't a thought that I needed to have. I just knew she was okay. It was just it was
Mm.
100% security. It wasn't like, I don't know how to explain it. It was because you are so instinctual when you're in birth. You are not in your logical mind, especially if you're in the right environment. And so I remember even when like I had this moment of going to the hospital, it had nothing to do with my daughter. She was fine. I never was worried about her. I knew she was okay. And it wasn't even, like I said, it was not a conscious thought. It wasn't like, is my daughter okay? It was just like, she is. It was just a
Yeah.
fact. And it was because I'd worked for 9-10 months on that relationship with her, that bond, that my intuition, my instincts, that it was just automatic in birth. And then now in motherhood, now I get to reinitiate that over and over again. Like every time when something's up with her, I always get a chance to do it. And every time I trust it, I'm right. And every time it's right. And so it's super interesting over and over again. That's like the journey of motherhood. But most often we don't do that because we outsource it again by bringing our babies to the hospital, to the doctor, or having someone else tell us, or asking someone else outside of us if everything's okay with our child, when really inside of us we have the answer again and again and again.
Mm. So do you feel like this was a conscious choice going into pregnancy that you were like, I'm going to trust my intuition? Or was it more like pregnancy and birth initiated you into that?
No, it was a conscious choice. I consciously chose to have a wild pregnancy because I wanted that intuition. I knew I because I'd heard so many stories before that. I studied birth for probably 2.5 years before I was ever pregnant. And then I had my long pregnancy and my conception journey and all of that. So I knew before I was pregnant that I was going to do a wild pregnancy, and I knew that I was going to free birth. I actually decided to free birth before I even knew free birth was a thing. I just did it because I didn't want to go to the hospital. There was no midwife close by. So I was like, I guess I'll just do it by myself. And I didn't know that that was a thing that women did. I just thought I was crazy because I'm always crazy. Like I'm always the crazy one in my life. Like I traveled by myself to countries to South America. Everyone thought I was nuts. I started my own business. I didn't have a regular job. I didn't go to university. Like I always do things differently. So I was just like, okay, I think this is another thing. Like I'm just the only one who does this. And then I found out really quickly later after the decision that, oh, actually there's like thousands of women that do it. And through learning about it and hearing women's stories and talking about their intuition and all these different things, there was two things that I wanted and why I decided to have a wild pregnancy was, one, to build that intuition. I wanted to have that trust and that connection with my baby, to build that connection with my baby and with my intuition. And also because I wanted to grow my baby in peace and love and trust and surrender, and not in fear and stress. Because with an ultrasound, every time if you use that as a way to find out if your baby's okay, then every time that you're not with the ultrasound on your stomach, you're constantly in a fear that something's wrong, because you only know as long as the ultrasound's on you. And whether that's like, I think most women aren't conscious of that, but they're literally in a constant state of like, is everything okay? I don't know. Because they're constantly outsourcing from their own knowing, to somebody else or to a machine. And so that's literally like whatever time frame there is between each ultrasound. The only time of peace and trust and everything's okay is when the ultrasound is on their stomach. And so there's like that constant stress, and our babies are being built cell by cell by cell, and that's being in fear and stress and unsureness. And I really wanted to just give my baby all the love, all the calmness, without any fear, any stress. Because I believe the energy that we create in our pregnancy really affects our babies. Because my sister-in-law, when my mother-in-law was pregnant with her, she was attacked by a dog, and now she's never been attacked by dogs. She's never had any issues with dogs, but she's terrified of dogs, and it's because
Wow.
her mom was attacked when she was pregnant. So it's like super clear that whatever babies experience in the womb affects them in their life afterwards. Doesn't mean they can't heal. It doesn't mean that, like, if there is trauma and stuff like that, they can be healed. But that was one of the things I really consciously wanted to do. And so if I ever had a fight or an intense situation in my pregnancy, I was very conscious of like connecting with my baby and helping her release it and myself release it so that it wouldn't stick in her and wouldn't stay with her. So yeah, that was like, I try to be really conscious with all the decisions I make, as long as I know what I know, because I'm sure there's things I don't know and that I will learn later maybe.
Yeah, it's a beautiful decision. And I mean, if women are maybe hearing, if you're listening to my podcast, I doubt this is the first time you're hearing about wild pregnancy, but if it is, it's like you can actually just opt to do whatever you want when you're pregnant and just allow it to be a nourishing time for you. And that's exactly what Laura's speaking to, is like she chose to feel good and nourished. And that's what allowed her to have a healthy pregnancy, not all these like tests that actually can be like quite traumatic for you and your baby.
Yeah, and damaging. They're
Yeah.
really damaging. A lot of them, like ultrasound, actually changes the cell structure of a baby. It's heating up the tissues and heating up even just a couple of degrees can totally change the entire structure. So,
Yeah.
so besides that, but beyond that, it's also the reason why I don't vaccinate my kids and all of that is like understanding that everything that's meant to happen, like sickness and even miscarriage, all of that has a reason behind it. I'm not trying to prevent it. I'm not trying to prevent sickness. I'm not trying to prevent miscarriage or any of those things, because I believe that our bodies and our kids' bodies are perfectly designed and know exactly what they need when they need it. So like my daughter has a cold right now and it's obviously hard. She has like a little cough and it's cute and it's sad and it's like sometimes hard for us to sleep and stuff like that because it's hardest for her at nighttime because she can't breathe properly. But I know that there's a reason for it. And so I'm never of the mind of trying to, it's like, it's not just about the toxins, it's also like there's a reason why our body has the things that it has. So it's not just about
Mhm.
prevention, it's also understanding that there's wisdom behind all of it and it's not by accident. So that's kind of how I go about all life. Like even so, like I said, my family we did it homeopathy. So I was only raised with homeopathy and I think I had antibiotics like less than 5 times in my entire life. So
Wow.
I was raised that way, but now I'm even gone to a step further, and maybe I'll change this at some point. I don't know, but I don't even use homeopathy almost never. I think we've used it once with her when she had a little allergic reaction from the pesticides on the fruit here.
Mhm.
But other than that, I've never used it, and because I just trust that her body knows what to do. And maybe it's not wrong, but maybe there will be a time when I need it if it's something more dramatic. But um until now I haven't done anything like any plant medicine or any homeopathy. I just trust that our body has the ability and the wisdom in order to heal and knows what to do, and it's just about supporting it and having the love in the environment in order to allow that to happen. And obviously it might take longer, but it actually heals, whereas I think when we take medicine or do something else, oftentimes just suppressed, and then it often takes longer to heal or comes back again or something like that. So I think there's a beautiful magic and a beautiful um design to all of this. And so I think trusting that has been a big part of my journey and has been a big part of how I'm raising my daughter and how I went through pregnancy and birth and everything.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it sounds like every decision comes back to trust. And that's such a stark contrast from what a lot of people do, which is making decisions out of fear. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a conscious choice you've made. I'd love to hear like whatever you want to share about your birth.
Yeah, my birth was beautiful. It was the coolest day of my life, and not because my baby was born. That was just the whipped cream on top of a really delicious hot chocolate. But it was basically everything that I wanted and so much more, and everything that I imagined and envisioned, but even more so. And so the first 12, how long was that? Like 15 hours was completely pain free, was beautiful. I just danced through it. I spent the night sitting in front of or rocking and rolling on a yoga ball and on my hands and knees and moving and dancing and swaying and all these different things in front of a fireplace. We rented a house so I wanted to have time to just initiate before the birth started, and I also wanted time after to just connect with my husband and my baby and just not have any distractions and not be on the land, because I'm a homesteader, so there's lots to do here. There's always lots of people and lots of responsibilities, so I just didn't want to have anything that would make me get out of bed earlier than I wanted to, and just be able to focus on my baby and nothing else. So we rented a house a little bit closer to town, but not that close. It was still quite a ways out. And so yeah, when the birth started, I just was like rocking and swaying, and in front of the fireplace I had twinkly lights and candles, and it was beautiful. I loved it. It felt so romantic. It was just me and my baby. It was romantic for myself. And then eventually I got into the shower. I learned that the shower was very relieving. And then when I got out a couple hours later, I was not prepared for how much of a difference it would make, but I got out and was like, whoa, that's intense. So hot water has an incredible effect. And I learned, I'm just going to tell you the learning points and things because it's a lot of details otherwise. But
Yeah.
so I learned that um, I could use either the water or my husband to help with the sensations. But then when the water or my husband wasn't there, it was so intense that I could have, but it was so overpowering that it was overwhelming. And so one of the things that I'd like to do differently next time is to not have any sort of distractions from the intensity. And I wouldn't necessarily call most of what I felt pain, because pain for me is something very different. And so, I mean, everyone has a different definition of pain. Like, I have like tons of tattoos. So, like, I
Mhm.
obviously have a good understanding of pain. I've never taken pain medication. I don't take any of that kind of stuff. So, but I don't think you need to have a high pain tolerance in order to do this. It's not about pain. I think it's just understanding what is happening. And because I had such a deep understanding of what was going on in my body, what had to happen, and I had complete and utter trust for my body, for my baby, for the birth process, and that everything knows what to do. And I just have to get out of my own way, basically, because I do believe that birth is all about, I believe that our bodies know what to do. And that's why women who are in comas or women who are paralyzed can still birth vaginally, even though they aren't doing anything. They're not literally, they either don't feel their body or they're not awake, so they can't do anything, and their babies are still born. And that's because our body knows what to do. And so it's really our work to get out of our own way and stop fighting our body. I believe that most of what happens in birth and why there is pain in birth is because we are fighting what needs to happen. We are fighting the process. We're fighting, we feel the sensation, it scares us because we don't know it, and then we tense up, and that makes it painful, and then we get scared, and then we tense up more, and it gets more painful, right? And that's why it happened. And so I learned in my pregnancy really consciously how to release any tension in my body so that my body could do what it needed to do. And so that's why I believe it wasn't painful. And then eventually, once my waters broke, it got really intense, and I started to get what I would guess was a fetal ejection reflex, or some sort of like full body convulsions, was like pushing my baby down through my vaginal canal, and or through my cervix. Actually, it wasn't even through yet, it was just up, and that was like 8 hours of that. So it was really intense. It was like the combination of throwing up, and if you've ever like not gone to the bathroom where you have to like work at it and you just like let it go, and then eventually it basically comes out of you forcefully, and it's like a convulsion that happens that you can't even stop if you wanted to. Like, it was like the combination of those two. It might be TMI, but that's basically what it felt like. And I had that for 8 hours, and it was super intense. And to be honest, the contractions were nothing in comparison. Like, they were like, I was like, oh, there's a sensation, and then oh my god, my whole body's like, it's like, imagine vomiting, like, but dry heaving for like 8 hours. So I was like just
Mhm.
exhausted, my whole body. And there was a point. So I didn't fear birth. So I was not trying to fight it. And so I was just like, I wasn't fighting it, but I was trying to still control it. And so my learning lesson from my birth was that I had to fully surrender. So the beginning I was flowing in good, and that was good as well while my cervix was opening. But then when my waters broke and that pressure from the baby broke my waters, that then the head starts to come down. It's even more intense than the water bag of water. So I definitely recommend, don't pop your bags of water, because I did, it happened all naturally. I didn't pop it, it just happened by itself. But after the bags drop, it's much more intense. So I would love to hear from someone who has an in-sac baby, because that must be much less intense. Maybe, I don't know. But anyways, I remember exactly when the water broke. I was like, okay, it's gonna get more intense. I had like 5 minutes of break. That was the only break I had my entire birth, and then it got really intense. And so at some point, I just got exhausted, and I was like, I feel like nothing's changing. I feel like nothing's moving, and I have another analogy for you. So it's basically like, if you know the ocean, there's like waves. They come towards the shore, right? So if you try to swim out, or if you get stuck in a rip current, you can try to fight against it. That will be really intense. You can try to control it, like try to find your body. But the actual way to get out of rip current and how to get out of strong waves pummeling you is to surrender and float. And then eventually you get pushed out and up, and then you're out. So my husband explained this to me because he's a surfer. I was like, that's exactly what I experienced. So when I surrendered and stopped trying to control it, stopped trying to figure out what's happening, when I just completely surrendered to whatever was happening in my body, not trying um, to control the intensity of it, and just allow it to be whatever it needed to be, I literally, my husband reminded me of this. This is like when I decided I want to go to the hospital. He was like, "Hey, just try one more." And he reminded me of what I was learning. I was learning this. I learned this from Yolanda Norris Clark in her portal program. And I don't really remember what she said, but he reminded me of something that she said, and which is basically something to the effects of surrender the pain, let it get as big as it possibly can. Like, just let it get as big. Like, don't try to stop it, don't try to push it down, just let it be big and horrible and get as big as possible. And then when you realize it gets as big as possible and you don't die, that's when pleasure comes. And so basically I let it get big, big,
Oh.
big, big, and at the end of that, all of a sudden, nothing. There was no more intensity, there was no more, even what I could maybe sort of say is pain. There was nothing. It was just complete bliss. I don't know how to explain it. It was just complete bliss. I was so hyper conscious of my body, and I could literally feel my baby coming through my cervix all of a sudden, coming down. And before that, I could feel nothing. I remember very clearly, I think after that contraction, or maybe the second one, that all of a sudden I could feel something in my yoni, because that whole time I couldn't feel anything, like no sensations down there. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, there's nothing. And then all of a sudden I could feel it there. And I was like, oh my God, there's something happening. And this is amazing. It was
Mhm.
so cool. And then it was like, I could feel her literally centimeter, millimeter by millimeter coming through me. And I could feel her like, I remember very clearly, I was had my eyes closed, I was totally focused, and I remember thinking, I'm about to feel what is the ring of fire. I'm curious what it's going to feel like. And I remember her coming through, and I remember it was like not a disassociation thing. It was a kind of like watching my body, but not with eyes, but with sensations. It's like, that feeling that people say they leave their body and they watch themselves. It was like that, but in a sensation way. So I could feel everything, but I didn't feel it. I didn't feel any pain. I didn't feel like I could feel. I don't even know how to explain this. I could feel that there was burning, but I didn't associate it with myself. It was just a thing that was happening, and it wasn't painful. It was just like, oh, interesting. And then I could feel it, and I was like, wow, this head's really big. I remember thinking that, but it wasn't painful. It was just like, that's what's happening. And then she came out, and I reached down. I could feel her, and then and then she slipped out. I picked her up, and I put her on my chest, and euphoria, like I've never experienced in my entire life. Like, it was. And then the feet, I felt more confident in myself. Like, it was like this. I was so damn proud of myself. I was like, I did that. I
Of
like got through the
course.
thing that I thought I couldn't get through, and I did it. And I'm more capable. Like, it was like this. I'm more capable than I ever thought. And like, I'm more amazing than I ever thought. Like, my body's amazing. My baby is here. Like, oh my God, she's real. And all these different things. Like, there was so many emotions that was happening. And beyond that, also being like, thank God I'm in the hospital so I can just enjoy this moment. I can just be
Oh.
present. I can just be here. Nobody's touching us. Nobody's interrupting. My husband was just sitting there recording and put a candle on because it was pitch black, and who was just there, and he was like laughing and crying with me and just observing us, and nobody was interrupting, nobody was doing anything. And eventually he asked, can we look, because I told him like I don't want any interruptions, anything, and he was like very carefully just asked like, can we look, like can we see what it is? And then it's like, of course. So then we looked, and I'm like, oh my God, it's a girl. And like super
Mhm.
excited because I thought it was a boy the whole time, because everyone told me there was a boy, and I didn't. I knew I think subconscious I knew she was a girl. I just didn't want to accept it because I was scared that I'd be wrong and then disappointed, so I didn't accept that it was a girl. But I think I knew, because every time someone told me it was a boy, I would be super irritated, but like, you don't know my body. My body's not the same as everyone else's. They did it by the base of like how your stomach is sitting and stuff.
Right.
And every time someone would tell me it was a girl, I'm like, I think so too. But I wouldn't say it out loud. Like, I wouldn't say anything. So I was so happy. And I remember looking over and over. I'm like, it's still a girl. Okay, she's still a girl. It's still a girl. Okay, it's a girl. I looked so many times. And then eventually birthing my placenta. That was a little bit of a workout. It was an interesting experience. And then actually I bled a lot also, so that was also an interesting experience, but like not having any fear, feeling good in my body, feeling totally clear-minded. Birthing my placenta, then the blood stopped, and then burning the cord was really beautiful also, and just like holding my baby and cuddling her. And actually she didn't have a suck reflex, so that was again where I had to reintegrate into my intuition and my trust and my understanding. And I ended up calling my mom, and it was beautiful. She was excited, but it was also a lot of interruptions that happened, and a lot of
Mhm.
her medical training coming through. And like, she felt like she had to do a fundal massage, even though I knew I didn't want that. I still accepted it, I still allowed it to happen. And she had me shower, even though that's really not necessary for the first couple of days for mom or baby. And like all these different things that I, in hindsight, it's not that I regretted, it was just interesting to see. Like, I knew what I wanted, I knew that I didn't want those things, and yet when I had my mom who loves me and cares about me and wants the best, I still outsourced my trust into her instead of into myself. So it's really, really interesting. And that's what someone I love, and that respects me and listens to what I want. And I'm only imagining how worse it would have been if I would have been in a hospital. It's so interesting. And so she did eventually suck, but it was 30 hours later. It was quite the a thing. It turns out she was just really, really full because she pooped a ton of meconium, like for 12, like for 8 hours, just poop, poop, poop over and over and over again, like handfuls. Like she was just really well nourished, which is amazing. My mom afterwards was like, I guess you were just really healthy and you just ate really well and your baby
Yeah.
was just really full. And that's why she wasn't hungry. That's why she didn't suck because she was just so hungry. And so in the end, it was all good, but it was terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. I definitely was like, great, I had this beautiful birth, everything's perfect. Now I'm gonna have to take her to the hospital. She's gonna have a feeding tube because she doesn't even suck. She can't feed. She can't even eat formula. So it was terrifying, but it was all good. And in the moment that I connected with her and took a moment, and everyone left, like the first time I asked her what's going on, and she pooped a huge poop in my hand, a huge meconium black tarry poop into my hand. And then again when I did it a couple of hours later, like 10 hours later, when we were hitting the 30 mark, my mom's like, this is getting serious. I was like, honey, you gotta suck. And she immediately latched on and took her this. And
Wow.
ever since then, it's not been an issue. So, like, all the potential pain that could have happened in breastfeeding, like, was definitely uncomfortable. But for me, because I was so terrified that she wouldn't breastfeed, and that's something like we would have to go to the hospital, all of that, whenever she sucked, whenever she latched on, it was like that uncomfortableness of that beginning learning how to breastfeed. I was like, it was like a glorious feeling. It was like, yes, she's sucking. Thank God. Like, it was like that shift of like something could have been painful and uncomfortable turned into something like, this is happening. Like, it's real. She's actually getting in her latch. It's like a sign of success, not a sign of pain. It was amazing. So it made postpartum and all of that really fun because I was just like, that just means that she's latching on. So at nighttime when she would latch, I was like, I knew when there was that like sensation of uncomfortableness, I was like, she's got it. She's got the move. And it was just always like this euphoric moment of like, yes, we've got this. And it was really amazing. And I
Mm.
rested for 15 days. I did the 5-5-5 rule. It was definitely not long enough. It was amazing. It was definitely why I believe that our journey has been so successful and so joyful and so quote unquote easy, because I've prioritized our relationship, our breastfeeding relationship, and resting. But it was not long enough. I ended up getting a prolapse about a week after, and I didn't know at the time, but I had excruciating back pain. And so I will advocate for every woman, please, please, please rest. And like next time, I will be doing 40 days because yeah, it was excruciating. It's still something I'm dealing with now, a year and a half later. And yeah, so definitely something that I'm advocating for. I think it's part of my journey. I think that everything that we learn about ourselves and any hard things that we go through is really just to learn about it and then teach it to others. So that's what I'm doing, is learning about it and then sharing my wisdom once I have it. So that's where I'm at now.
Wow. It's so special to hear your birth story. I know that I heard bits and pieces of it because you shared it afterwards, and it's so sweet to hear. Again, just the amount of intuition and connection you had to your body and trust you had in your body and in your daughter is really inspiring. And so I hope for the women listening who are, maybe along this pregnancy and motherhood path, that you hear that is something you can choose for yourself. And I love the like you were like, okay, honey, you have to latch. And then she did. Or
Yeah,
suck,
it was
right?
amazing.
So
I started crying right away, and so did my mom because she was also scared, of course. Like she was like, I don't know
yeah.
what to do. Like she's not latching. What do we do? And we're also in Peru, right? So it's not like my mom knows the system here, and yeah,
Yeah.
who knows what would happen and all of that. So we both cried, shed tears, my mom and I. So it was yeah, it was a beautiful moment also.
Well, and it too reminds me of like this idea that we think all babies are going to be the same when they come out. You know how some babies scream and some babies are just really peaceful, and like there's just so
Hmm.
many variations because of course we're all different people when we are born, and so we're going to have
Yeah.
different needs and different personalities that come through. And yeah, she's just taken her
Yeah,
time.
it's one of the things that I'm super passionate about, is that I think we have this idea, it's subconscious. I don't think that people actually think that babies are stupid, but we have this idea that babies are, I don't know, like maybe like an animal, but even animals, like it's like they think that they're just like this thing, like they're not a fully formed being that has needs and wants and wishes, and
Mhm.
it comes with its own wisdom and knowledge and teachings. Like even if it's not conscious for them, it's still there. And that's something that I've been really passionate about, is respecting my daughter whatever she wants.
Mm.
And so one of the things actually that I learned in my postpartum, because I didn't expect this, is I thought that I would be, the cool mom that would let people hold their baby and all that stuff. And my intuition was screaming at me like, hell no, do not let this baby go ever. And so I spent a year where she was held by less than 5 people,
Wow.
and for less than probably an accumulation of, I don't know, like it was like 20 minutes every couple of days, if that, if that. And she never wanted it. Like that was the amount of time she would allow anyone to hold her. And And at first, I remember talking to our group, our women's group, and asking, like, is this selfish that I'm not allowing my husband to hold her, other people? Like, I feel like I'm being selfish. And they're like, no, that's biologically normal. And now I've come to
Mhm.
realize it is. And like, she is so content. And every single person who has met her since the day she was born is remarks on how happy of a baby she is, how content she is, how easygoing she is. And if she does cry, it's like very briefly and or for a really good reason, like she bumped her head or something like that. And she's just so happy and content. And now she's such an independent, beautiful little girl. And she still wants me. She still needs me. But like there'll be times she's just playing by herself, and I'm just admire her so much. Like she knows what she wants and she knows what she needs, and she's known that since she was born. And like I also had this theory when I was pregnant that babies don't need to cry. Like I don't believe that babies actually need to cry.
Mhm.
I believed, and now I know that babies cry because we don't listen to them fast enough, and that they have
Mhm.
cues way before they start crying. And she was very clear with what she needed. She would breathe really deeply, and because I was so conscious of her and aware of her, I knew. So I she never had to cry. I think she cried an accumulation of 5 times her entire first year of her life. Now she's a toddler; it's a different story. But when you're a baby, they are crying because they have 5 needs. They either need to be fed, they need to sleep, they're tired, they are probably being changed. But in my case, I did baby pottying, so that was never an issue. Um, or what was the other thing? Overstimulation is a big one, which I think people don't think about.
Mhm.
Overstimulation is a huge one. I think that's a reason why many babies cry is because they're overstimulated, overcharged over that. And so that was
Mhm.
the 5 times that she cried. I believe it was because of that, like because she was overstimulated. And so what I had to do is walk by the river, go for a walk, just let her release those emotions, release that
Yeah.
feeling in her, that extra charge. And then she was a content again. She would sleep, and like I never had issues sleeping because we slept together. She slept at the beginning on my chest during naps, and then on my side I laid sideways. And I teach a lot of moms this now, is like having my arm up and have her right here in this, so that my boob is like accessible to her right away. And it took time for us to learn that. It took about the first month or so, but once we learned that, sleep was amazing. Like she slept most times, like it was rare that she didn't sleep the whole night through. And I
Mhm.
also learned to pick her up and roll her over, because I just had this intuitive thing that I was like, she's probably like us. Like, we as adults, when we wake up, we roll over, and then we're comfortable again, we fall back asleep again, right? And I was like, maybe babies need the same thing. So I started to pick her up with my whole body and roll over to my other side, and then she would sleep perfectly. So that was probably around 4 or 5 months when she started to need that. And that's what I do now when she's fussy or wakes up for whatever reason, unless she has a nightmare or something like that. But other than that, like that was just made it easy. And I've never been lack of rest or any of that, except for my own doing, because I don't sleep enough because I go to bed too late, but not because she's not sleeping. And it's all because I've just been super intuitive. I've just been connecting with it, and I've been learning so much about her needs. And now I'm teaching that to my clients and to anyone who wants to listen, because I believe that it's the reason why we're so content, and why it's been quote unquote easy. And there's been hard moments, of course, but that's not the majority of our time. And just like life, right? Like life can be beautiful most of the time if we know how to help ourselves, how to take care of ourselves, how to understand our mind and all these different things. And yes, there are hard things. You can have an accident or whatever. And she got sick. She had the chicken pox. She's had lots of things. So there have been hard moments, but overall, like it's just been so beautiful and so incredible. And she is just the most beautiful, hilarious thing ever. And I just am so blessed to have her. And I'm just so thankful that I get to be her mom.
Aw. Thank you so much for sharing all of your inspiring and beautiful stories. Like from all of it, it really screams to me that like motherhood can be this path to deeper trust and deeper self-love for yourself, and that you've made that conscious choice at every step of the way for this to be your path of growth. And yeah, I think that's really inspiring. And to close off, you've already given us so much wisdom, but if there's one more piece of what I call womb wisdom, which is kind of my name for just these things that we carry as women that we have to share with other women, what might that be for you?
I think to always go internal. I think that we know more than we think, and that we are powerful beyond what we can understand and what we are led to believe. I think that we are immensely powerful and have immense magic inside of us. And a magic for me is literally like that everything is perfectly designed inside of us to do exactly everything that we need. Like from pregnancy to birth to mothering, like from our chest heats up to keep our baby warm, our breast milk releases when our baby needs us. we are so intuitively connected to our babies. Like I remember times where I was really close to the edge and I almost rolled off her, or I almost rolled her off the bed, but I was like, my instincts were faster than my logical mind, and I caught her before it happened. Like every time that something like this happens, I just get reaffirmed that there's more inside of me than I ever realized. There's more power, there's more potential, there's more wisdom. And when we continuously give ourselves the opportunity to find that, I think it's a constant cultivation, growing and learning. And I think that birth, pregnancy, womanhood, motherhood, all of these things, and if you start like with you, Natalie, like learning about your body and your bleed and all of these things, you start now before you even have a baby, before you get pregnant, it just gets more powerful. And I'm so excited the next time I get to be pregnant just to feel that again and just reinitiate and it's like a next level every single time we have a baby, and every time we bleed, every time. I think every single part of being a woman is constantly giving us the possibility to be wiser and connect deeper to ourselves, to mother nature, to who we are designed to be. Like we are nature. We're not a part of it, we're not separate from it. We are nature, we are our biology, we are our spiritual understanding, and we are not a machine. We have so many different elements to ourselves: the spiritual, the physical, the emotional, the hormonal, all these different things. And when we understand how they work on a general sense, it makes it so much easier to enjoy our life. It makes it so much, everything is easier when we know what it is and we know how to follow it, know how to honor it, and how to respect it from whatever stage in life you are right now. And if we learn how to do that and learn how to trust it, and when we don't know, that we go internally and figure it out and just go move forward, even if we don't know, and trust even if we don't know if it's right, and it just constantly will be reaffirmed to us. And that just constantly is cultivating, and it's like digging out our potential, digging out our purpose, digging out our power and our magic. And I think that's what the work of being a woman is, being a mother, being a human. And it's all inside of us. And the more that we connect to our bodies, the more that we connect to how our bodies are designed to be, and trusting and following that design, then I think that life just gets more beautiful and more magical. And yeah, that's, I think, what the purpose of our life is.
So beautifully said, in resonance, and just love all of that. Oh, Laura, it's been so sweet having you on. If I know women are going to want to be looking you up to find, more about you and your journey. And yeah, I'd love for you to share where women can find you and what you have to offer.
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram is where I mostly do, but I am starting now to post on TikTok and YouTube, but it's all the same name, which is natural_Lau, which is like Laura, but without the R and the A at the end. It's how my nickname here in Peru is what my husband calls me. And it's the first time I love my name with just Lau. So it's Lau. That's it. So natural_Lau. And I try to share the wisdom that I learn as I go. Right now, I'm really focusing in the pregnancy, birth, and postpartum period, because I am selling my first program, which is a course and 3-month group coaching container with my friend Audrey from A Joyful Birth. It's been really powerful creating this and putting this into the world. So it's starting September 30th. So if you want to jump in, you still got a chance. It's going to be everything that I wish I would have had in one place. It's everything from the knowledge and the understanding, from the physical, the emotional, the spiritual aspects, the insights that have really helped me understand my life and be content and make conscious and intentional decisions every step of the way. It also has a community component so that women don't feel alone. And then we have the coaching calls, which are group coaching, which is more affordable than one-on-one coaching, but gives you the chance to ask questions and connect with us and get our wisdom once a week in a group container, and connect with other women and learn from other women as they're going through their things you might also be going through at the same time, and you don't realize it, and you kind of get this aha moment like, oh, I didn't realize that, oh, I was also feeling this. And then I'm also offering one-on-one coaching. It's my love language. It is my zone of genius, connecting with women on a one-to-one basis and being able to share the wisdom that comes from my heart, that comes from my instincts. I feel like I connect to source in a beautiful way when I'm coaching, and it's really where I feel like I can serve women the best. But it's not for everyone, but it is definitely something that I offer and I love to offer the world. And then I have a $7 ebook, which is a good way to jump in and start learn from me a little bit. And yeah, so that's basically what I'm offering the world. And I'm just about to launch a podcast too, so there's more things coming as we go.
Yeah, so exciting. That group program sounds amazing. I'm so glad that you and Audrey are offering that. And I also can't wait for your podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be called the Thriving Podcast. And so it's going to be everything that we're talking about, and everything from anything to do with women, and just about how we can make more conscious and intentional decisions to thrive in life and what it requires to be thriving, and from all different stages. And I can't wait to have you. You're also going to be part of the podcast, hopefully. And yeah, I've been wanting to do a podcast for a long time. I think it's the perfect way to share a little bit more with the world in a free resource for women. And then if you feel like you want more in depth, more details, more support, and more love, and not feel alone in your journey, then the program or the one-on-one support is where you can get more of that.
Amazing. Oh, well, thanks again, Laura. This has been such a treat to have you on here to share your stories and your wisdom. And I know that so many women are going to be inspired or find a point where they relate to you. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here.
You too, Natalie. Thank you for having me. This has been sharing stories is really sharing in this capacity is really my zone of genius, and I really love sharing and just see what comes to me, because I never plan when I talk. I just see what happens, and it always flows in a beautiful way. So I love the opportunity to share what I've been learning, and the challenges that I've gone through and have overcome or I'm still working through. And I think that's the work of connecting with humans, and hopefully others can learn from me. So that's what I hope. That's my dream.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.